The distress beacon had been screaming into the void for 6 standard cycles before anyone bothered to answer it. To be fair, nobody expected survivors. The planet was called Kessith 9, a hellscape of electrical storms that could fry a starship's circuits from orbit. The atmospheric pressure alone would crush most species into a fine paste. And yet, here I was, First Officer Threx of the Galactic Survey vessel Harmony's Edge, descending through clouds that looked like they wanted to eat my shuttle for breakfast. This is monumentally stupid, I muttered, checking my atmospheric shields for the 15th time. My captain's voice crackled through the comm. Repeat that, Threx? I said the readings are holding, Captain Vorna. I lied smoothly, because admitting your superior officer sent you on a suicide mission is bad for morale. The storm below was beautiful in the way a supernova is beautiful, meaning it was absolutely gorgeous and would definitely kill you. Lightning arced between cloud formations the size of continents, each bolt carrying enough energy to power a small civilization. The wind speeds made Category 5 hurricanes look like a gentle breeze. And somewhere down there, according to that insistent distress beacon, was a crashed human research vessel. Humans. Of course it was humans. I had been in the galactic community for 47 standard years, and in that time I had learned one universal truth. Humans were either the bravest species in the galaxy or the dumbest. The jury was still out. Probably would be forever. Approaching beacon coordinates, I announced, squinting through the viewport as rain hammered against the shields hard enough to make them flicker. Visibility is approximately 0. Scanners are picking up debris scattered across a 3-kilometer radius. Life signs? Vorna asked. Negative. But with this interference, I wouldn't trust the scanners to find a life sign if it was sitting in my lap playing a musical instrument. Something massive loomed out of the storm ahead. The wreckage of the human ship, twisted metal jutting from the ground like the bones of some prehistoric beast. The vessel had been called the Wandering Star, according to our records, a small research team studying extremophile organisms, because apparently, humans looked at a planet that routinely experienced storms powerful enough to be visible from 3 solar systems away, and thought, yes, that seems like a lovely place to collect bacteria samples. I brought my shuttle down near what looked like it might have been the cargo bay, though it was hard to tell since most of the ship was now distributed across the landscape in bite-sized pieces. The landing was rough. Everything was rough on Kessith 9. The planet didn't do gentle. I'm on the ground, I reported, running through post-landing checks with hands that definitely weren't shaking. Beginning search pattern now. Copy that. Threx, be careful down there. If conditions deteriorate, abort immediately. I almost laughed. If conditions deteriorated, the conditions were already approximately 3 levels past catastrophic. But orders were orders, and despite my better judgment, I actually did care about the idea of someone being stranded on this nightmare world. The environmental suit sealed around me with a hiss of recycled air, triple reinforced against electrical discharge, rated for extreme pressure, equipped with enough emergency supplies to last a week. I stepped out of the shuttle and immediately got knocked sideways by wind that could have doubled as a battering ram. Oh, this is just fantastic, I growled, activating my suit's magnetic boots. They locked onto the ground with a satisfying clunk, though even then I could feel the wind trying to pick me up and throw me into the stratosphere. The wreckage was worse, up close. Hull plating peeled back like flower petals, exposed wiring sparking whenever the rain hit it just right. I picked my way through the rained debris field, scanner extended, looking for anything that might indicate survivors or at least remains that could be returned to families. Wandering Star, this is Galactic Survey Rescue Team. Does anyone copy? Static. Of course static. The electromagnetic interference on this planet could drown out a sun-going supernova. I pushed deeper into the wreckage, following the distress beacon's signal. It was getting stronger, which meant I was getting closer to whatever was left of the ship's emergency systems. Lightning split the sky overhead, close enough that I could feel the charge building in the air, making the scales on my neck stand on end. Thunder followed immediately, so loud it rattled my teeth inside my skull. And then I saw movement. I froze, scanner raised like a weapon, heart suddenly doing interesting acrobatic maneuvers inside my chest cavity. Something was moving in the twisted shadow of what might have been the ship's medical bay. Something small, low to the ground, picking its way through the debris with surprising confidence given the circumstances. "Hello?" I called out, feeling ridiculous talking to what was probably just some local wildlife. The thing turned toward me, and I got my first good look at it. It was possibly the ugliest creature I had ever seen, and I had once spent 3 months cataloging the wildlife on Sludge World Beta. Thick gray-black fur, stocky body, claws that looked like they could open a hull with minimal effort, and a face that suggested it had been hit repeatedly with something heavy and had taken personal offense to the experience. The creature regarded me with small, dark eyes that held exactly 0 fear and approximately infinite disdain. "What in the name of the 12 clusters are you?" I breathed. The animal made a sound somewhere between a grunt and a growl that clearly communicated it didn't think much of my question. Then it turned and started walking, occasionally glancing back as if to say, "Well, are you coming? Or what?" I hesitated. Following mysterious creatures through alien storm wreckage wasn't typically in the rescue manual. On the other hand, the rescue manual didn't have a chapter on surviving Kessith 9, so clearly we were improvising anyway. The creature led me around a collapsed bulkhead and through what had been the ship's main corridor. Its walls were now more suggestion than structure, open to the screaming wind and rain. Another lightning strike, close enough to leave spots dancing in my vision. The creature didn't even flinch, just kept walking with the casual confidence of something that had decided storms were someone else's problem. And then, I saw her. The human was sitting with her back against a relatively intact section of hull, one leg extended, the other bent at what my medical training immediately flagged as a concerning angle. She was young by human standards, probably early 20s in their years, with dark hair plastered to her face and clothes that had seen significantly better days. Her skin was several interesting shades of bruised, and there was a makeshift splint on her left arm that looked like it had been constructed from chair parts in sheer stubbornness. But she was alive, and she was smiling. Not the smile of someone glad to see rescue. Not even the smile of someone delirious with pain and relief. This was the smile of someone who had looked at the universe's absolute worst offering and decided it was mildly amusing at best. "Hey there," she said, voice rough but steady. "Took you long enough." I stared at her, then at the creature, which had waddled over to sit next to her like a particularly grumpy guardian, then back at her. "You're alive," I said, which might have been the single stupidest observation in my entire career. "Seems like it, yeah." She shifted slightly and winced, but the smile didn't fade. "Sorry about the mess. The planet got a little aggressive during landing." "A little aggressive?" I gestured at the apocalyptic wasteland surrounding us. "The planet tried to murder you." "Well, sure. But it didn't succeed. So really I'm giving it a passing grade for effort." She patted the creature beside her, which made another one of those dismissive grunting sounds. "This is Biscuit, by the way. He's been keeping me company." "Biscuit." I repeated the word carefully, trying to make sense of it. "That creature is called Biscuit? Earth animal. Honey badger, to be specific." She looked down at the creature with genuine affection. "Found him in one of our containment units. We were studying comparative aggression responses in extreme environments. Turns out honey badgers respond to extreme environments by not caring even a little bit." Lightning struck close enough to illuminate the entire scene in stark white light. Thunder followed like the planet clearing its throat before delivering a killing blow. Biscuit the honey badger yawned, showing teeth that looked entirely too capable of solving problems through violence. "Let me get this straight," I said slowly, because someone needed to acknowledge the absolute insanity of this situation. The ship crashed, in the worst storm system in this sector, on a planet that actively wants everyone dead, and you survived because you had an Earth animal called a honey badger that just decided storms weren't worth worrying about. "Well, when you say it like that, it sounds lucky," the human said, still smiling that unhinged smile. "But really, Biscuit did most of the heavy lifting. I just tried not to die." "Just tried not to die," I echoed faintly, wondering if perhaps I was the one who was delirious. Another gust of wind slammed into us hard enough to make my magnetic boots strain. The human barely seemed to notice, and Biscuit looked actively bored by the attempt on our lives. "Can you walk?" I asked, moving closer to assess her injuries properly. "Not quickly and not well, but probably enough to get to wherever your ship is if you help me along." She paused, tilting her head. "You do have a ship, right? You didn't just walk here for the exercise?" My shuttle is approximately 200 meters that direction. I pointed back the way I'd come. Think you can make it? Honestly, I survived 6 days on Kessith 9 with a broken ankle and a concussion while a honey badger judged my life choices. Walking 200 meters sounds like a vacation. She held up her good arm. Help a girl up? I gripped her arm carefully and pulled her upright. She swayed slightly but stayed standing, weight mostly on her good leg. Biscuit immediately pressed against her other side, providing support with the long-suffering air of someone who had been doing this for days. All right, team, the human said cheerfully, like we were about to go for a pleasant stroll instead of fighting our way through a planetary tantrum. Let's get off this rock before it comes up with new and creative ways to kill us. What's your name? I asked as we started moving, supporting most of her weight while Biscuit served as a very hairy, very grumpy crutch on her other side. Mira, she said, breathing hard but keeping pace. Junior xenobiologist, senior survivor, current holder of the record for worst vacation in recorded history. First Officer Threx, I replied, reluctant rescue specialist and future advocate for hazard pay increases. She laughed, actually laughed, as lightning painted the sky in shades of violence, and the wind tried to separate us from our skin. You know what the funny thing is? I genuinely cannot imagine what you find funny about this situation. We came here to study how life adapts to extreme conditions. Another step. Another wince, carefully hidden behind determination. Turns out the answer is you bring a honey badger, and you stop caring whether the universe wants you dead. Biscuit made a noise that might have been agreement, or might have been a comment on the quality of our conversation. It was hard to tell with honey badgers, apparently. The walk back to my shuttle took approximately 3 times longer than it should have, and felt like approximately 3 years. Every meter was a negotiation with gravity, wind, and Mira's injuries. But slowly, painfully, we made progress. The human never stopped talking, maintaining a running commentary that swung wildly between technical observations about the storm patterns, affectionate insults directed at Biscuit, and what I was increasingly certain were symptoms of a significant head injury. Did you know, she said at one point, shouting to be heard over the wind, that honey badgers have incredibly loose skin? It's an adaptation to help them escape predators. You can grab them, and they can literally turn around inside their own skin to bite you. Isn't that wild? That's horrifying, I corrected, but she was already moving on to the next topic. I named him Biscuit because he's small and compact and surprisingly dense, just like a biscuit. Also because it's funny to say things like Biscuit destroyed my laptop or Biscuit ate through his containment unit like it was made of paper. Did he actually do those things? Oh, absolutely. Honey badgers are basically rage and determination wrapped in fur. They fight lions, Threx, lions, animals that could eat them in one bite, and they just don't care. My shuttle appeared through the rain like a blessed metallic angel of salvation. I had never been so happy to see a spacecraft in my entire life. Almost there, I encouraged as Mira stumbled slightly. Biscuit immediately steadied her, making another one of those grumbling noises that somehow conveyed both support and complaint. He's a good boy, Mira said, patting the creature's head with her good hand. Terrible, violent, destructive, but good. We reached the shuttle's entrance, and I activated the door with a prayer to deities I didn't believe in, that the mechanisms hadn't been fried by the electromagnetic chaos. The hatch opened with a hiss of pressurization that was the most beautiful sound in the galaxy. Getting Mira inside required some creative maneuvering, and several new additions to my vocabulary that probably weren't appropriate for official reports. Biscuit leapt up the ramp with ease, then turned to watch our struggles with what I was certain was amusement. Stop judging us, I told the honey badger as I finally got Mira settled into a seat. Biscuit yawned again, which felt like a pointed statement about my rescue capabilities. I sealed the hatch, cutting off the howl of the wind and the hammer of rain. The sudden silence was almost shocking after hours of planetary violence. I made it to the pilot's seat, hands already flying over the controls to begin pre-flight sequences. Harmony's edge. This is Shuttle 1, I called into the comm. I have a survivor. Repeat. I have a living human survivor and her emotional support nightmare creature. Requesting immediate medical bay prep, and possibly a xenobiologist to explain what I'm bringing aboard. Captain Vorna's voice crackled back, surprise clear even through the static. Confirmed. Shuttle 1. One survivor? The crew manifest listed 6 researchers. I glanced back at Mira, who had gone very quiet suddenly, staring at her hands. Biscuit had climbed into her lap, a compact ball of protective aggression. "Just one, Captain," I said softly. "And she's been through enough. Medical bay and then we ask questions. Understood?" "Understood, Threx. Bring her home." The engines fired up, struggling against Kessith 9's gravity and anger. The shuttle lifted, fighting for every meter of altitude. Lightning struck our shields twice during ascent, and once something massive flew past the viewport that might have been debris or might have been one of the planet's aerial creatures. I chose not to investigate. Mira remained silent until we broke through the cloud layer, and suddenly the stars were visible, distant and calm and everything this planet wasn't. Then she made a sound, half laugh and half sob, and pressed her face against Biscuit's fur. "We made it," she whispered. "You absolute monster, we actually made it." Biscuit, for his part, seemed entirely unsurprised by this outcome. Of course they'd made it. The universe had tried to kill them, and failed. That's just what happens when you're a honey badger and the human who doesn't know when to quit. I guided the shuttle toward Harmony's edge, visible now as a point of light moving in high orbit, well above Kessith 9's area of effect. My hands were shaking slightly on the controls, adrenaline finally catching up with the reality of what we'd just done. "Thank you," Mira said quietly from behind me, "for coming down there, for not giving up when the scanners said no life signs." "Thank the distress beacon," I replied, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. "And thank your stubborn refusal to die. And Biscuit," she added. "Definitely thank Biscuit." The honey badger made a sound that suggested he considered thanks unnecessary and possibly insulting. He knew his worth. As we approached the ship, I found myself smiling despite everything. Despite the storm. Despite the fear. Despite the absolute chaos of the last few hours. Because somehow, against every odd the universe could throw at them, a human girl and a honey badger had looked at certain death and decided it simply wasn't convenient right now. The docking bay doors opened, and I brought us in smooth and steady, setting down with a gentleness that felt absurd after everything we'd been through. Medical teams were already rushing toward the shuttle, ready with stretchers and scanners and all the tools of people who fix the broken. "Ready?" I asked Mira. She stood carefully, Biscuit still in her arms, and smiled that impossible smile. "Threx. I survived Kessith 9 with a honey badger as my only companion for 6 days. I'm ready for literally anything." The hatch opened, and we walked into the light and warmth of the ship, leaving the storm behind but carrying its story with us. And somewhere on Kessith 9, the lightning continued to rage, unaware that it had just lost a fight to the 2 most stubborn creatures in the galaxy. The medical bay of Harmony's edge smelled like antiseptic and recycled air with a hint of something that might have been fear, or might have been the curry someone had cooked 3 decks down. Dr. Kelvin, a Thalmorian with 6 arms and the bedside manner of a particularly irritated rock, descended on Mira the moment we cleared the shuttle doors. Broken tibia, fractured ulna, possible concussion, severe dehydration, and what appears to be electrical burns on your left shoulder, Kelvin rattled off, scanners whirring over Mira's body before she'd even been properly settled onto the medical bed. "How are you conscious?" "Spite, mostly," Mira answered, wincing as one of Kelvin's arms prodded her injured leg. "And stubbornness. Also, I didn't want to leave Biscuit unsupervised." Biscuit, who had been forcibly removed from Mira's arms by a very brave or very foolish medical technician, was currently contained in a temporary habitat unit across the room. He was expressing his displeasure by systematically testing every surface for weaknesses, claws scraping against reinforced transparent aluminum with sounds that made everyone's skin crawl. "That creature needs to be quarantined," Kelvin said, 2 eyes on Mira, and 4 on the honey badger destroying his medical bay's piece. "Standard protocol for unknown species." "He's not unknown, he's from Earth," Mira protested as Kelvin began setting her leg with efficiency that bordered on aggressive. "Honey badger, Mellivora capensis. Documented for centuries. Completely harmless." From across the room, Biscuit chose that exact moment to bite through a supposedly indestructible feeding tube, spraying nutritional gel across the habitat's interior. He looked directly at us, made a sound like gravel being chewed, and continued his destruction. Completely harmless, I repeated flatly. That creature looks like it was designed by a committee whose only instruction was make it angry. Mira laughed, then gasped as Kelvin did something to her arm that involved several clicking sounds. That's actually pretty accurate. Honey badgers are basically evolution's way of saying, what if we made something small enough to be cute but angry enough to fight anything that exists? Captain Vorna entered the medical bay with the air of someone who had dealt with too many impossible situations to be properly surprised anymore. She was a Keltorian, tall and crystalline in structure, with facets that caught the light and made her look like she was made of living diamonds. Her voice had that particular resonance that suggested she had no patience for nonsense but infinite patience for competence. Miss Hallis, Forna said, nodding respectfully. I'm Captain Forna. I understand you've had quite an ordeal. You could say that, ma'am. Mira tried to sit up straighter and immediately regretted it based on the expression that crossed her face. Thank you for sending rescue. I wasn't sure anyone would come. We almost didn't, Vorna admitted with the bluntness I'd come to expect from her. The storm made it nearly impossible. When First Officer Threx volunteered, I thought I was sending him to recover bodies. Hey, thanks for that vote of confidence, Captain, I interjected from where I was leaning against the wall, still in my environmental suit because taking it off felt like admitting the rescue was really over. Vorna's facets shifted in what might have been amusement. You're welcome, Threx. Now, Miss Hallis, I need to ask about the rest of your crew. The medical bay went very quiet. Even Biscuit paused in his systematic destruction to turn toward Mira, as if he understood the weight of the question. Mira's face did something complicated, emotions flickering too fast to properly identify. The storm hit us 30 seconds into landing. We'd barely touched down when the electrical surge fried every system simultaneously. Main power, backups, emergency protocols, all of it just went dark. She swallowed hard. The crash was bad. The ship broke apart on impact. I was in the specimen containment area running final checks on Biscuit's habitat when it happened. And the others? Vorna asked, gently, which for her was remarkable. Dr. Yates was on the bridge. He wouldn't have survived the initial impact. The hull breach went straight through that section. Mira's voice had gone flat, factual, the tone of someone reciting information to avoid feeling it. Engineers Quan and Desai were in the engine room trying to route emergency power. That's where the fire started, according to the logs I could access before the systems died completely. Biologists Morrison and Park were in the forward lab. She stopped, staring at her bandaged hands. I searched for 3 days once I could move. Found Morrison in the wreckage of the lab. He'd been killed instantly by falling debris. Never found Park. The storm, it just kept getting worse, and pieces of the ship kept tearing away. I had to stop searching because I couldn't risk getting caught in the open when the lightning got bad. A pause. Biscuit found me on day 2. I think his habitat had been thrown clear during the crash. He was just sitting there in the rain, looking annoyed that his dinner was late. Despite everything, I smiled at that image. A honey badger, surrounded by apocalyptic destruction, primarily concerned with meal schedules. I'm sorry for your loss, Vorna said, and meant it. Their families will be notified. Their sacrifice in the name of research will be honored. They didn't sacrifice anything, Captain, Mira said quietly, anger threading through the exhaustion. We didn't go to Kessith 9 to die for science. We went because we thought we could learn something valuable and come home to tell everyone about it. The universe just decided to remind us that some places don't care about your intentions. Kelvin finished with Mira's injuries, stepping back to let his scanners complete their work. You'll heal completely given time and proper rest. The concussion is mild, remarkably. The breaks are clean. You're incredibly fortunate, Miss Hallis. Yeah, Mira said, not sounding like she felt fortunate at all. Lucky me. Biscuit made a low growling sound from his habitat, drawing everyone's attention. He was staring at Mira with those small dark eyes that somehow conveyed both complete indifference and absolute focus. Can I take him out? Mira asked. He doesn't do well with confinement. It makes him destructive. As opposed to his current behavior, which is so constructive, Kelvin said dryly, gesturing to the ruined interior of the habitat. Please, Mira said, and there was something raw in her voice. He kept me alive down there. He brought me water from puddles, dragged emergency rations from the wreckage to where I was sheltering. When the scavengers came at night, The ones with too many teeth and not enough fear. He fought them off. He sat with me during the worst of the storms when I thought the lightning was going to find me and finish what the crash started. She looked at Vorna directly. I know it's against protocol. I know he's technically cargo or a specimen or whatever classification makes the paperwork easier. But he's also the reason I'm alive. And he's scared right now even though he'd rather die than show it. So please, let me have my friend back. Captain Vorna considered this for a long moment, facets catching the light as she thought. Then she nodded. Dr. Kelvin, release the creature to Miss Hallis's care. She's responsible for any damage he causes. Captain, I must protest, Kelvin began. But Vorna raised one crystalline hand. Noted and overruled. The creature stays with her. The habitat opened, and Biscuit exploded out. Like he'd been fired from a cannon. He hit the floor running, crossed the medical bay in seconds, and launched himself onto Mira's bed with complete disregard for her injuries. She caught him with a gasp that was half pain and half relief, and the honey badger immediately curled into her lap, making a sound like a rusty engine turning over that might have been contentment. Good boy, Mira whispered, running her good hand through his thick fur. Such a good boy. Even if you are an absolute terror. I have questions, I said, because someone needed to address the situation. Starting with how exactly did a research mission end up with a honey badger? Mira smiled, the expression more genuine now with Biscuit's solid weight against her. Our mission was studying aggression adaptation in extreme environments. How do naturally aggressive species respond when placed in conditions that would normally trigger fear or submission responses? Earth has amazing examples, and honey badgers are legendary for their complete refusal to back down from anything. I once watched documentary footage of a honey badger fight off 6 lions, she continued, scratching behind Biscuit's ears. Another one that got bitten by a cobra, passed out from the venom, woke up 2 hours later and finished eating the snake. They're small, but they're basically concentrated rage and determination. Sounds like humans, Kelvin muttered, storing his medical equipment. Exactly, Mira said brightly. That's actually part of why I specialized in behavioral parallels between Earth species and human psychology. Honey badgers don't quit because quitting isn't in their nature. It doesn't matter if the opponent is bigger, stronger, more numerous. They fight until they win or until they can't fight anymore. Vorna crossed her arms, her crystalline structure making small chiming sounds with the movement. And this philosophy helped you survive Kessith 9, how exactly? Because when the ship crashed and I realized I was alone and injured on the worst planet in the sector, my first instinct was to panic, Mira said simply. But then Biscuit showed up, soaking wet, covered in mud, looking absolutely furious at the universe for inconveniencing him. And he just got to work, finding shelter, locating supplies, staying alert for threats. He didn't waste time being scared or feeling sorry for himself. He just dealt with the situation one problem at a time. She looked down at the honey badger, who had closed his eyes but whose ears were still tracking every sound in the medical bay. So I did the same. Couldn't walk? Fine, crawl. No food? Find some. Storm trying to kill me? Find better shelter. Every single problem had a solution, even if the solution was just survive until tomorrow and try again. 6 days, I said, still having trouble processing it. You survived 6 days on Kessith 9 with broken bones and a concussion. 5 days and approximately 18 hours, Mira corrected. But who's counting? Besides me, obviously. I was definitely counting. A technician entered the medical bay, tablet in hand, looking nervous. Captain, we've completed the preliminary scan of the wreckage site. There's a secondary debris field approximately 5 kilometers east of the main crash site. The storm is intensifying again, but we got drone footage before we had to pull back. Vorna took the tablet, studying the images. Her expression shifted, facets darkening slightly. Miss Hallis, were you aware of a secondary impact? Secondary impact? Mira frowned, trying to lean over to see the screen. Biscuit grumbled at the movement but shifted to accommodate her. No, I thought it was all one crash. This looks like something separated from the main ship during descent. The cargo module, perhaps. Vorna zoomed in on the image, showing a section of hull that had embedded itself into the ground hard enough to create a small crater. The damage pattern suggests it broke away early, before the primary crash. Mira went very pale, staring at the image. That's not the cargo module. That's the secondary lab pod, where Park was working. The medical bay went silent again, but this silence felt different, heavier. The pod has its own emergency beacon, Mira continued slowly, and its own life support system. It was designed to detach during catastrophic hull failures to protect sensitive research. I didn't even think to check if it had deployed because I assumed everyone was in the main ship. Vorna was already moving, barking orders into her comm. Threx, you're with me. Medical team, prep for possible additional survivor. All hands, prepare for another rescue operation. I pushed off the wall, exhaustion forgotten. Captain, the storm is getting worse. The drone footage showed Category 7 winds, which is why we're going now before it hits Category 8, Vorna said sharply. Miss Hallis, do those pods have enough life support for 6 days? Evan, if you're careful with the oxygen recyclers, Mira said immediately. But the impact, if it was hard enough to crater, the systems might be compromised. Then, we don't have time for debate. Vorna headed for the door, and I followed, already mentally preparing for another trip to that nightmare planet. Wait, Mira tried to get up, and immediately regretted it, as her broken leg reminded her of its existence. You need to know about the scavengers. They come at night, or what passes for night down there. 6-legged things, all teeth and speed. The pod's hull will keep them out, but if Park tries to leave to signal for help, we'll handle it, I assured her. Though internally I was adding scavengers to my growing list of reasons to retire early. Take Biscuit, Mira said suddenly. Everyone stopped, stared at her. Then at Biscuit, who opened one eye to glare at the room for interrupting his rest. Absolutely not, Kelvin said immediately. She's delirious from the concussion, I added helpfully. I'm completely serious, Mira insisted. Those scavengers are afraid of him. He fought off 3 of them the first night, and after that they wouldn't come within 50 meters of wherever he was. He's small enough to fit in your shuttle, smart enough to follow basic commands, and mean enough to make any predator reconsider its life choices. Vorna looked at the honey badger assessingly. Biscuit looked back with an expression that suggested he'd fight a captain if the captain wanted to start something. You want us to take your emotional support rage animal into a rescue operation, Vorna said slowly. I want you to take the single most effective anti-predator deterrent I've ever seen into a situation where predators are definitely going to be a problem, Mira corrected. Plus, he's bored here. You'd actually be doing me a favor. This is insane, I said, but I was already considering it. Because the thing was, she had a point. We didn't know what we'd face down there, and having something along that was too stupid or too aggressive to be afraid might actually be useful. Threx? Vorna asked, leaving the decision to me because apparently this was my day for terrible choices. I looked at Biscuit. Biscuit looked at me with those dark eyes that had seen the worst a planet could offer, and had responded with violence and determination. Fine, I said. But if he destroys my shuttle, you're explaining it to maintenance. Mira beamed, despite her obvious pain. He'll be perfect. Biscuit, buddy, you're going on an adventure. The honey badger's expression suggested adventures were stupid, but if there was violence involved, he supposed he could participate. 10 minutes later, I was back in my environmental suit, running pre-flight checks while Captain Vorna coordinated from the bridge, and sitting in the co-pilot's seat, secured by a harness that he'd already tested for weaknesses, was approximately 15 kilograms of pure aggressive determination wrapped in fur. Weirdest day of my career, I informed Biscuit as we undocked from Harmony's edge, and I once had to negotiate a peace treaty between 2 species who communicated entirely through interpretive dance. Biscuit made a sound like rocks in a blender and settled into his seat, apparently unconcerned with my existential crisis. The descent through Kessith 9's atmosphere was just as horrible the second time, which was somehow worse because I knew exactly what to expect. Lightning painted the sky in shades of violence. Wind tried to physically separate my shuttle from existence. Rain hammered against the shields with the persistence of someone trying to break down a door. And through it all, Biscuit sat calmly in his harness, watching the chaos outside with complete indifference. Once, when a particularly close lightning strike made the entire shuttle shudder, he yawned. Unbelievable, I muttered, fighting the controls to keep us steady. Absolutely unbelievable. The secondary debris field appeared through the storm, Smaller than the main crash site but no less devastating. The lab pod had hit hard enough to bury itself halfway into the ground, hull buckled but somehow still mostly intact. The emergency beacon was still broadcasting, which was either very good news or very cruel false hope. I brought the shuttle down as close as I dared, which wasn't very close at all given the terrain. Harmony's edge, I'm on site. Beginning approach to the pod now. Copy that, Threx. Vorna's voice crackled through the interference. Life signs? Scanners are useless in this mess, same as before. I'll have to get close to know anything. I released Biscuit from his harness. He immediately trotted to the airlock, waiting with the patience of someone who had places to be and no time for delays. Okay, so apparently you've done this before, I said, sealing my helmet and opening the airlock. Wind immediately tried to invade the shuttle, bringing rain and the smell of ozone and danger. Biscuit bounded out into the storm like he was going for a casual walk, completely unbothered by conditions that made me question every decision that had led to this moment. We fought our way to the lab pod together, me with magnetic boots and desperate determination, Biscuit with 4 legs and the kind of attitude that suggested the storm should be worried about him. The pod's emergency hatch was partially buried, damaged but still sealed. I activated my suit's external speakers. Dr. Park, this is Galactic Survey Rescue. If you can hear me, make any sound. Tap on the hull, use emergency comms, anything. For a long moment, nothing. Just the roar of wind and the steady beat of rain and my heart doing uncomfortable things in my chest. Then, faint but unmistakable, tapping. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. The universal distress signal. Someone was alive in there. I've got a response, I shouted into my comm, already moving to the hatch, pulling emergency tools from my pack. Life sign confirmed, beginning extraction. The hatch mechanism was jammed, twisted by impact damage and corroded by 6 days of Kessith 9's hostile atmosphere. I worked the manual release, servos in my suit, whining with effort. Biscuit sat nearby, watching the surrounding area with alertness that suddenly made a lot of sense. He wasn't worried about the storm. He was watching for the scavengers. The hatch finally gave way with a screech of protesting metal. I pulled it open, shining my suit's lights into the dim interior. A figure moved in the shadows, shambling forward into the light. Dr. Althea Park looked like she'd gone 10 rounds with death and won on a technicality. Her research suit was torn in a dozen places, jury-rigged repairs holding it together through what I suspected was equal parts engineering and prayer. Her face was bruised, one eye swollen shut, and she moved like every bone in her body was personally offended by the concept of movement. But she was alive. She was conscious. And when she saw me, she smiled. "Took you long enough," she said, voice hoarse but steady. I was starting to think I'd have to walk home. I laughed, the sound half hysteria and half pure relief. "Yeah, we're getting complaints about our response times. Come on, let's get you out of there." I helped her through the hatch, supporting most of her weight as she climbed out into the storm. She gasped when the wind hit her, legs buckling, but I kept her upright through sheer stubborn refusal to let this rescue fail now. That's when Biscuit made a sound I'd never heard before. Low, threatening. A growl that somehow carried over the storm's roar. I turned, following his gaze, and saw them. 6-legged shapes moving through the debris field, low to the ground. Too many of them to count quickly. The scavengers Mira had warned about, drawn by movement and the scent of potential prey. They moved like liquid, flowing over and around obstacles, all teeth and hunger, and the kind of predatory focus that made every instinct scream run. "Oh, that's unfortunate," I said with remarkable calm given the circumstances. "Those are the things?" Park asked, following my stare. "The ones in my nightmares?" "Probably," I confirmed, already calculating distances and odds. The shuttle was 30 meters away. We were injured, exhausted, and significantly outnumbered. This might get interesting. Biscuit walked forward, placing himself between us and the approaching scavengers. He looked tiny compared to them, a small bundle of fur facing down creatures that probably weighed 3 times what he did. He didn't care. The first scavenger lunged, all speed and teeth. Biscuit met it head-on with a fury that would have made his ancestors proud. There was a sound like a meat grinder processing rocks, a flash of claws and teeth, and suddenly the scavenger was retreating, bleeding from a dozen wounds, making sounds that suggested it was reconsidering its career choices. The other scavengers hesitated, pack mentality warring with self-preservation. Biscuit made that grinding growl again, daring them to try something, and I swear the creatures actually looked nervous. "Your honey badger is terrifying," Park said with something like awe in her voice. "He's not my honey badger, he's Mira's, and yes, he absolutely is." I agreed, taking advantage of the standoff to start moving toward the shuttle, half carrying Park. But right now I'm extremely grateful for his poor decision-making skills. The scavengers followed at a distance, looking for an opening. Biscuit matched our pace, walking backward, eyes locked on the pack, radiating an aura that clearly communicated, "I am small but I am mean and I will make you regret everything." We made it to the shuttle in the longest 30 meters of my life. I got Park inside, turned to grab Biscuit, and found him still facing down the pack, refusing to give ground until we were safe. "Biscuit, time to go," I called. He glanced back at me, then at the scavengers, then deliberately turned his back on them, and trotted into the shuttle with the casual confidence of someone who knew the predators wouldn't dare attack now. He was right. The scavengers watched us leave, making no move to follow. I sealed the hatch, strapped Park into a seat, secured Biscuit back into his harness, and got us airborne with hands that definitely weren't shaking. The shuttle punched through the storm, climbing toward orbit in safety and sanity. Both survivors recovered. I reported to Harmony's Edge, voice perhaps slightly higher pitched than normal, requesting immediate medical bay prep and possibly therapy for everyone involved. "Confirmed, Threx," Vorna said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Well done, both of you." Park looked at me, then at Biscuit, then started laughing. It was the slightly unhinged laughter of someone who had survived impossible odds and was just now processing it. "We survived," she said between gasps. And actually survived. A death world tried to kill us and we survived because of excellent rescue work and a honey badger with anger management issues. That about sums it up. "Yes," I agreed, guiding us toward the docking bay. Biscuit made a satisfied sound and closed his eyes, apparently considering the matter settled. He had fought predators, defended his humans, and once again demonstrated that the universe's problems were someone else's concern. The docking bay doors opened like welcoming arms. Medical teams rushed forward as we landed. Park was immediately whisked away to join Mira in getting thoroughly examined by Dr. Kelvin's six-armed expertise. I carried Biscuit back to the medical bay, where Mira was still confined to her bed but looking infinitely more relaxed knowing her friend had been found. "Park?" she asked immediately. "Alive, conscious, and already complaining about the research data she lost in the crash," I assured her, depositing Biscuit onto her bed. "Your honey badger performed admirably. Terrified a pack of scavengers, protected us during extraction, and only moderately judged my piloting skills." Mira hugged Biscuit with her good arm, burying her face in his fur. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such a good boy." Captain Vorna entered, facets bright in the medical bay's lighting. "Both survivors are stable. The human medical authorities have been notified, and a transport will be arranged to return you both to Earth once Dr. Kelvin clears you for travel." "Thank you, Captain," Mira said, looking up with eyes that were suspiciously bright. "For not giving up on us. For sending rescue even when it seemed impossible." "Thank First Officer Threx," Vorna said simply. "He's the one who went down there. Twice." Mira looked at me, and I suddenly felt uncomfortable with the gratitude in her expression. "I was just doing my job. You went to a death world in impossible conditions to save people who were probably dead," Mira said softly. "That's not just a job. That's choosing to believe people are worth saving even when everything says they're not." I didn't know what to say to that, so I settled for nodding awkwardly and making some excuse about needing to file reports. 3 days later, I stood in the docking bay, watching a transport ship prepare for departure. Mira was there, leg in a proper medical cast now, moving with the careful precision of healing bones. Park stood beside her, similarly bandaged but whole, and between them, in a transport carrier that had been reinforced 3 times, was Biscuit. "You know," Mira said as final boarding was called, "when we left Earth, we were trying to prove that aggression and determination were key survival traits in extreme environments. Looks like you got your proof," I said. "Yeah." She smiled. the expression carrying echoes of everything she'd survived. Turns out the research was right. When everything goes wrong and the universe tries to kill you, the answer isn't giving up or being afraid. It's deciding you're too stubborn to die and too angry to quit. Very human philosophy, I observed. Very honey badger philosophy, she corrected. We just learned it from the right teacher. From inside his carrier, Biscuit made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been a demand for food. It was hard to tell with honey badgers. They boarded the transport, and I watched it undock, carrying 2 humans and 1 extremely aggressive animal back to Earth, back to safety, back to lives that would forever carry the weight of Kessith 9 inches their memories. Captain Vorna joined me at the viewport, watching the transport accelerate away. Quite the rescue, she said simply. Quite the survivors, I corrected. I just gave them a ride home. Threx, in all my years in space, I've seen a lot of species face death, Vorna said quietly. Most accept it with dignity or fight it with desperation. But humans? They look at certain death and decide it's negotiable. They survive things that should kill them through sheer refusal to acknowledge the universe's verdict. And honey badgers, I added. And honey badgers, she agreed, which apparently are just condensed humans in a more compact package. I laughed, the sound carrying relief and exhaustion, and the peculiar joy that comes from succeeding at something that should have failed. Somewhere on Kessith 9, the storms continued their eternal rage, indifferent to the fact that they'd lost. The planet would keep trying to kill anything that landed there. That's what it did. That's what it would always do. But somewhere in the galaxy, 2 humans were alive who shouldn't be. They had survived because they refused to quit, because they had each other, and because they'd had the galaxy's angriest animal as their companion. The universe had thrown its worst at them, and they'd walked out the other side with broken bones, wild stories, and a honey badger who didn't care about anyone's opinion. Sometimes, I realized, the universe underestimates just how stubborn life can be when it decides not to die. And that's the real lesson of Kessith 9. Not that humans are unkillable or that honey badgers are invincible, but that sometimes, when everything goes wrong and death seems certain, the correct response is to look at the universe's threat and say, not today. Then keep walking until you find someone crazy enough to come pull you out of the storm. I filed my report, recommended both Threx and Biscuit for commendations, which raised several eyebrows in administration, and went to my quarters to sleep for approximately 18 hours straight. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance, uncaring and beautiful and full of impossible stories waiting to happen. And somewhere on Earth, a honey badger was probably destroying someone's furniture and remaining completely unbothered by anyone's opinion about it. Exactly as it should be.